Hi all, Adi here from Huntston Johns. As always, thank you so much for clicking on the video. Today I'm in deepest, darkest Devon and I'm in a tiny village called Combpyne, and I found this most beautiful tiny little church, so let's go and have an explore. In this lovely small village in East Devon, you find tucked away quietly amongst the rolling countryside a beautiful medieval church, the Church of St Mary. Now, while at first glance it may appear modest, it's a small rural parish church built of local stone, and it's sitting peacefully above the valley. But like so many ancient English churches, its walls tell a story stretching back many centuries. The church we see today is largely a 13th century building, although its origins are probably older. Historians believe the site may have been used for worship as early as Saxon times. And you can see there's loads of apotropaic marks here around the font. Records suggest a church existed here before the late 12th century, when a dispute about the church living was settled during the papacy of Pope Urban III, sometime between 1185 and 1187. So this means that people have likely been gathering on this same spot for prayer, worship and community for more than 800 years, and perhaps even longer. The name of the village itself is ancient. Combe comes from Old English meaning a wooded valley, while Pyne refers to the Pyne family, who actually inherited the local manor in medieval times through the marriage with the Coffin family. Yes, I did say the Coffin family. Together with the name Combine or Combpyne paints a picture of a rural landscape shaped by both geography and family history. Now, the church itself is now a Grade 1 listed building, and that's a designation given to structures considered to be of exceptional historic and architectural importance in England. And I found this beautiful old photos on the wall. St Mary's has a very unusual tower. It has a very distinctive saddleback roof, and I'll show you that from the outside later on. Now, this type of roof is extremely rare in Devon, and it's far more common in parts of continental Europe, so it makes the tower here in this church a particularly distinctive feature. Now, there's loads of bells here, 3 actually in fact, and 2 of which date back to the year 1400, so they're amongst the oldest surviving bells in the county. You can imagine the generations of villagers who would have heard those bells ringing across the valley, marking weddings, funerals, harvest festivals and Sunday worship. And over at the north door here, there's loads of apotropaic marks, all different types of symbols, otherwise known as witch marks. The basic layout of this church is really simple and traditional, and I love when I find the lists of rectors on the wall. The building consists of a short nave where the congregation gathers, the chancel, which is where the altar stands, the porch, and of course that beautiful west tower. There's the beautiful war memorial. It's nice to see it nice and clean. Now, the core of the church was built around the 13th century during the early English Gothic period. This style of architecture favoured pointed arches, narrow lancet windows and a sense of vertical elegance. But of course, over the centuries, the building has continued to evolve, and during the 14th and 15th centuries, new windows were inserted and the nave and other alterations were made. Now, these changes always reflect both the practical needs of the church and changing architectural tastes as the medieval church developed. There are fragments of wall paintings still surviving in the church, and there's some of these murals which are text panels. They're very well preserved and very ornate on the north and west walls, and they're thought to be from early 18th century. Now most of them contain prayer text, but up by the arch there is another couple of panels that contain the 10 Commandments. Now these panels are actually Victorian, and they were renovated rather beautifully in 2009. On the south wall is a picture of a ship. Very unique. Can't say I've ever seen a picture of a ship in a church before. Now, this has caused much discussion. It was uncovered in 1950 during redecoration. It is thought to be a votive drawing of St. Nicholas done by a seafaring parishioner of the 14th century. Inside the church, you can still see remains of features that once played such an important role in medieval worship. And one example is this stairway that would have once led to a rood loft. Now, in medieval churches, the rood loft was a raised gallery which supported a large crucifix or rood overlooking the nave. And this formed a symbolic and visual divide between the nave and the chancel. Now, although the loft itself no longer survives, the staircase that once led to it can quite clearly be seen, and it's quietly preserving a trace of that medieval life. And here at the east end of the church, in the chancel, you can still see the group of 3 lancet windows, which was a classic feature of this period. There's also a very well preserved piscina set into the chancel wall. Now, these small stone basins were used during the Mass to wash the sacred vessels. And there's also this Elizabethan oak table, which was actually found in the vestry, covered with white paint and varnish, but it was restored back to its former glory in 1950. So that was the original altar table, but I couldn't find a date for that. Also on the east wall, I found this tablet to a Nicholas Pinney, who was in fact a rector here from 1661 to 1693. Like so many English parish churches, St Mary's underwent restoration during the Victorian era. In 1878, the building was repaired and restored, and it was a process that was aimed to preserve the medieval structure while making the church suitable for continued use. Now, Victorian restorations were so common across England as a renewed interest in medieval architecture led to major conservation projects in churches that had stood for centuries. So I'm sure without that valuable restoration work, many of these medieval buildings would no longer be standing today. We're just going to head out into the churchyard, and I'm going to show you one of the cutest things I've ever found in a graveyard. This is an actual model of this church, which was made by a very talented man, Stephen Popovic of Kilmington Isn't it amazing? I would love to have something like this. Absolutely love it. Now, he presented it himself to the village in June of 1996. Unlike grand cathedrals or large town churches, St Mary's is very much a rural parish church, small, quiet and very closely connected to the landscape around it. The stone walls, simple layout and centuries-old features create a sense of continuity with the past. And I always find it really easy to imagine the medieval villagers gathering here after walking across fields and along long, muddy, windy lanes, such as people still approach the church today, but we all do it by car nowadays, don't we? The church now serves the joint parish of Combpyne and nearby Roosden, continuing its role as a place of worship and community gathering. Standing here today, it's remarkable to think that this small village church in Devon Valley has survived the medieval period, the Reformation, the Civil War, Victorian Restoration, and is now in the modern age. I'm going to wrap the video up here. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you could please like and subscribe and hit the hype button if you've got one down below. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really helps the channel out. And if you'd like to help the channel a little bit more, you can hit the Buy Me a Coffee link down below, because that allows me to make a donation, which I always do, to these buildings that I visit, because I think it's really important that they're kept for future generations. And if the church does have a direct link for donations, I know this one is under the care of a trust, then I shall link it in the description below. But thanks again for watching, and I shall see you for the next one. It might be a hunt, it might be a jaunt, who knows. Bye for now.